This might be the most disturbing moment in modern Formula One. Not because of what happened, but because everyone knew it was going to happen. Weeks before Suzuka, drivers warned the FIA. They described the exact scenario. A car losing up to 80 km per hour. On a straight, another arriving at over 300? With less than 2 seconds to react. That's not racing. That's inevitable impact. And then, it happened exactly like that. Lap 22. 50G. A crash so violent, it pushed the limits of survival inside a Formula One car. And here's the part that changes everything. This wasn't driver error. This wasn't weather. This was caused by the rules. A system so unpredictable, even the drivers couldn't control it. Now the entire grid is united. World champions, rookies, race winners, all saying the same thing. This should never have happened. And leading the revolt? Max Verstappen. Asking the one question the FIA cannot escape anymore. What are they waiting for? Subscribe now, because the detail everyone is missing is exactly why the situation is far worse than it looks. The revolt didn't begin after the crash. It began long before it. Quietly. Inside briefings. Inside interviews. Inside moments most people didn't notice. Because from the very first race, the drivers already understood something was wrong. Not just difficult. Dangerous. Melbourne was the first signal. Carlos Sainz didn't talk about performance. He talked about consequences. He explained something very specific. Massive speed differences on the straights, caused by one car having energy, and another suddenly losing it. And then he said the words that now define everything. It's only a matter of time. That wasn't a guess. That was a calculation. Because drivers feel things before anyone else does. They feel the instability. They feel the unpredictability. They feel the moment when control starts to disappear. Now Esteban Ocon adds another piece. He describes what it looks like from inside the cockpit. You're on a straight. Flat out. Everything normal. And suddenly, you look in your mirror, and a car is arriving at you. 50 km per hour faster. No warning. No time. Just instant pressure. And in that moment, you don't know what to do. Move. Stay. Commit. There isn't enough time to decide. Now Verstappen takes it even further. He explains the part that makes this truly dangerous. At those speeds, there is no reaction window. You're not choosing. You're reacting. And reaction is never enough at 300 km per hour. Now connect all of this. Unpredictable speed loss. Massive closing speeds. Zero reaction time. That's not racing. That's a setup. And every driver on the grid could see it. Clearly. Independently. Without needing data. Without needing confirmation. Because they were living it. Lap after lap. Race after race. Now here's the part that changes everything. They didn't stay silent. They spoke. Repeatedly. Directly. Publicly. Warnings in Melbourne. Stronger warnings in China. Even more direct warnings before Suzuka. And yet, nothing changed where it mattered most. No decisive action. No immediate correction. Just discussions. Evaluations. Time passing. And that delay is what transforms this story. Because once the accident happens, the narrative is no longer about what went wrong. It's about what was ignored. And that's why what comes next is not just reaction. It's rebellion. And then Suzuka happens. Not as a surprise. As a confirmation. Because from the moment the race begins, you can feel it. Something is wrong. Cars behaving normally, until suddenly, they don't. Speed building. Then disappearing. Gaps closing. Too fast. Too aggressively. And every driver feels it. That tension. That uncertainty. Because now, they're not just racing. They're waiting. Waiting for the moment the system turns against them. Lap after lap, the same pattern repeats. Energy deployment. Energy loss. Unpredictable behavior. Until everything aligns, in the worst possible way. One car enters emergency harvesting. Critical battery state. And instantly, it loses massive speed. Not gradually. Not predictably. Instantly. On a straight. At maximum speed. Now another car approaches. Flat out. Over 300 km per hour. Everything calculated, based on normal behavior. But this isn't normal anymore. The closing speed explodes. 40, 50, even 80 km per hour difference. That's not a gap. That's a collision waiting to happen. Now think about the time available. Less than 2 seconds. That's all a driver has. To see it. Understand it. Decide. React. At 300 km per hour. It's impossible. And in that moment, Everything the drivers warned about becomes reality. Bearman arrives too fast. The car ahead behaves unpredictably, moves slightly, closes the only escape route. And now, there is no option left. Brake, not enough distance. Turn, no grip. Avoid, no space. The car leaves the track, hits the grass, becomes uncontrollable. And then, impact. 50G. Violent, sudden, inevitable. And in that exact moment, the entire debate ends. Because now, there is no argument left. No theory. No opinion. Only proof. And proof does something nothing else can. It exposes everything. The warnings. The delays. The decisions not taken. So when the car stops, and Bearman climbs out, something else begins. Not relief. Not closure. Accountability. And that's when everything changes. Not on track. Inside the paddock. Because the moment Bearman steps out of the car, the conversation is over. The warnings are over. The patience is over. Carlos Sainz doesn't sound relieved. He sounds frustrated. Because he was right. And being right means this could happen again. George Russell connects it instantly. Weeks of discussions. Weeks of ignored warnings. And now, a 50G impact. That's not coincidence. That's consequence. And then Verstappen speaks. No hesitation. No diplomacy. Just one question. What are they waiting for? Because now, there is nothing left to investigate. Nothing left to confirm. The exact scenario happened. Exactly as predicted. So why hasn't anything changed? And that question is what ignites everything. Because now the drivers are no longer reacting individually. They're moving together. Different teams. Different interests. Same message. This cannot continue. And that unity is what puts the FIA in real trouble. Because criticism can be managed. Division can be controlled. But unity changes the balance of power completely. Now the pressure comes from every direction. Drivers demanding immediate changes. Teams forced to respond. Fans questioning the integrity of the sport. And the media amplifying every word. Every reaction. Every moment. This is no longer internal. This is global. And the FIA is no longer leading the situation. They're reacting to it. Emergency meetings. Urgent reviews. Promises of discussions in the coming weeks. But here's the problem. That's not enough anymore. Because the drivers are not asking for discussions. They're demanding solutions. Before the next race. Before Miami. Because Miami has long straights. High speeds. The exact conditions that created the crash. And now, there is no margin left. No second warning. No second chance. Because if something like this happens again, this doesn't stay a revolt. It becomes something much bigger. A complete collapse of trust. Between the drivers and the system meant to protect them. And that leads to the final question. The one that decides everything from here. Will the FIA finally act? Or are they waiting for something worse? This is where Formula One reaches a line it cannot cross. Because up until now, everything has still been recoverable. The warnings could be dismissed. The concerns could be debated. Even the crash could be called an unfortunate consequence. But what comes next cannot be explained away. Because now the drivers are not just reacting. They are preparing. Preparing for the possibility that nothing changes. And that is the most dangerous scenario of all. Because when drivers lose trust, they don't just complain. They adapt. They change how they race. They lift earlier on straights. They hesitate in overtakes. They avoid risks they would normally take. And that creates something Formula One cannot survive. Artificial fear. Because now, drivers are no longer pushing the limit. They are managing danger. And when that happens, the entire nature of the sport changes. Overtakes disappear. Battles become cautious. Decisions become defensive. Not because of competition, but because of uncertainty. Now think about what that means. The fastest drivers in the world, second-guessing every move. Not because of skill, but because they don't trust the system. That's not Formula One anymore. That's survival. And that's exactly why this situation is so critical. Because the revolt is no longer just about fixing the rules. It's about restoring trust. And trust is much harder to rebuild than it is to lose. Now the FIA faces its most difficult moment. Because any decision they make comes with consequences. If they act too slowly, they risk another accident. If they act too aggressively, they risk breaking the competition. If they target specific systems, they risk accusations of favoritism. And if they do nothing, they lose the drivers completely. There is no safe option left. Only necessary ones. And this is where everything connects. The warnings in Melbourne, the escalation in China, the crash in Suzuka, the revolt led by Verstappen. It all leads here, to a single decision point. Because Formula One has faced moments like this before. Moments where the sport had to choose between waiting or acting. And history is very clear. When Formula One waits, it pays a price. So now the entire season stands still, waiting for one thing. Not the next race, not the next result, the next decision. Because if the FIA gets this right, this becomes the turning point. The moment the sport corrected itself. But if they get it wrong, then everything we've seen so far, Melbourne, China, Suzuka, won't be remembered as the crisis. They'll be remembered as the warning. And the real story will be what happened after? When Formula One had the chance to fix it, and didn't. And this is the part no one wants to say out loud. Because once you understand it, you can't ignore it anymore. This wasn't just a failure of the rules. It was a failure of decision-making. A moment where Formula One had the information, had the warnings, had the time, and still didn't act. And that's what makes this different from anything else. Because accidents have always been part of this sport. But predictable accidents, that's something else entirely. Now go back to the timeline. Melbourne. Drivers explain the risk. China. They escalate the urgency. Suzuka. They repeat the warning, just hours before the race. And then, the exact scenario happens. Exactly as described. Same conditions. Same physics. Same outcome. That's not coincidence. That's confirmation. And once something is confirmed like that, the responsibility changes. Because now it's not about what went wrong. It's about what wasn't done. And that's why the reaction inside the paddock feels different. Heavier. More direct. Less forgiving. Drivers are no longer debating solutions. They're questioning leadership. They're questioning priorities. They're questioning whether safety is still the first concern. And that's a dangerous place for the sport to be. Because Formula One is built on one fundamental belief. That no matter how fast it gets, no matter how complex it becomes, there is always control. There is always a system protecting the drivers. But right now, that belief is cracking. And once it cracks, everything else becomes uncertain. Now here's the final layer. The one that connects everything together. If this accident had been worse, if Bearman hadn't walked away, we wouldn't be talking about rules. We'd be talking about consequences. Permanent ones. And that's the reality no one inside Formula One can escape. They were one moment away from something much bigger. Which means the real question is no longer about Suzuka. It's about what happens next. Because the FIA now has a choice. Act immediately. Change the system. Restore trust. Or delay again. Discuss again. Wait again. And risk turning a warning into something irreversible. Because Formula One has been here before. Moments where everything pointed in one direction. Moments where the sport had to decide between reacting to the past or protecting the future. And every time, the outcome depended on one thing. Whether they acted before it was too late. So now everything comes down to this. Not the next race. Not the next result. But the next decision. Because if they get it right, this becomes the moment Formula One saved itself. But if they get it wrong, then Suzuka won't be remembered as the accident that changed the sport. It will be remembered as the last chance to prevent what came after.